So, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our head and neck webinar series. We are into our second lecture. So, to deliver our second lecture, today we have Dr. Sean Joseph from Lakeshore Hospital, Kochi, who shall be discussing about radiological assessment of the neck. So, we had an overwhelming response to this teaching initiative. And from the last meeting, there were a few suggestions which the participants have suggested. Based on their input, we are considering rescheduling our Thursday's meeting to the evening. So we have planned the meeting can either happen on this time, that is between 8 to 9, or between 4 to 6. The decision on this will be decided on based on your inputs, which you can let us know by either emailing us or by giving your inputs to the link which we'll be sharing in a few minutes from now. In addition, since because of the increasing interest in this teaching series, from a weekly event, we are planning to do it as a bi-weekly event. So we'll have one more webinar every Saturday, that is between 4 to 6. And this week around, we have a very eminent faculty, Professor Anil D'Cruz, who will be talking on the current controversy in the management of neck, that is between 4 to 5 this Saturday. So in addition, we want to circulate this learning series to reach as much young postgraduates, young head and neck surgeon as possible. To make it possible, we have launched our YouTube channel. The HCG HNOK webinar is the YouTube channel, where we will be sharing our recorded videos at the end of the session. We are also live on Facebook. You can also follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram for updates on our academic series. So to moderate today's session, we have today Dr. Ratan Shetty, who is a very good friend of ours. He is a head and neck surgeon who has done his fellowship training from Kidwai, after which he has done his super specialty training, that is MCH, from Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. And currently is working as an assistant professor in Kidwai Memorial, Bangalore. So we have a team, Dr. Shalini Thakur, Dr. Anand, who will be looking at the chat box and help in coordinating the questions to Ratan. And we have Bhargav, who is hosting the meeting for us. So over to Ratan to introduce Sean and get the lecture started. Over to you, Ratan.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Let me thank the organizing team to provide me this opportunity at the outset. So let me introduce the speaker for the day. The speaker for the day is Dr. Sean, who is currently heading the head and neck services at Lakeshore Hospital, Kochi. He did his MBBS from Government Medical College, Calicut. Subsequent to that, he did his training in ENT from Vijay Medical College, Ahmedabad. And he got himself trained as a head and neck skull-based surgeon at Tata Memorial Hospital, and got his MCH in head and neck surgery from Amrita Institute of Medical Science. Right now, he's heading the head and neck services team in Lakeshore Hospital. Dr. Sean?
So, hello everybody. So, the topic we are having today is radiological assessment of cervical lymph nodes. At the outset, let me thank Akshay and his team at HCG Bangalore for this webinar initiative. And I would congratulate them for the effort they are putting up during this difficult time when we are finding other avenues of academic sharing very difficult. So going to the presentation, let's try to break this down into a few subheadings. Like whenever we are going for an imaging, there are a few things which we'll have in our mind. Like, when should we do an imaging? Like, there are different clinical scenarios where we have to do an imaging. So let's come to that. and what are the findings to look for in each of these clinical scenarios, and what imaging uh, should be most appropriate in each clinical scenario. Then we will be discussing what is evidence and what are the questions which are remaining. So whenever a patient is coming to you, there'll be a few clinical scenarios where you have to choose the imaging. A patient who is coming to you before treatment, before any treatment, uh, can be classified into a patient for primary evaluation. Patient is coming to you with a primary tumor with a node positive or a node negative neck, and you have to choose an imaging. Another scenario would be like a patient is presenting with a lymph node in the neck with an unknown primary. Uh, and after treatment scenarios would be like a post-treatment surveillance. And another thing is a patient coming to you after treatment with a recurrent or a residual disease. So let's see which investigation is appropriate for each of these scenarios. We have an array of investigations now, like ultrasound of neck, ultrasound guided FNAC, CT scan, MRI, PET CT, and some other investigations like investigations of special sequences of MRI, like diffusion weighted MRI or a perfusion, say CT or MR perfusion images, or something like ultra small super paramagnetic iron oxide enhanced MRI imaging. So we cannot, we have a lot of options, out of which we have to choose the best investigation for each scenario. So let's try to understand what a lymph node is and what are the different findings which can appear in a lymph node in each scenario. So when you're assessing the lymph node, first you should first let's discuss the structure of a lymph node. So the picture shows a lymph node. Lymph node has a fibrous capsule which sends trabeculations inside, and it has an outer cortex and an inner medulla, as seen in the picture. And it has a hilum, which is a way for the efferent lymphatics, and through the hilum, blood vessels enter and leave. Also, the lymph node has afferent lymphatic vessels. So, so this is the structure of a lymph node. So when you're assessing the lymph node, there are a few things which you should go through, like the size of the lymph node, the morphology of the lymph node, the shape of the lymph node, margin of the lymph node, and the distribution of lymph nodes in various levels of the neck. Because all of these are important in the assessment of your metastatic cervical lymph node. Let's come to the size first. Size radiologically, like a metastatic node can present with any size, like even if for a node less than 5 millimeter, there can be metastasis into the node. So size is not a foolproof criteria, but there is one thing, like if you keep a 1 centimeter size cutoff, there's 88% sensitivity and 39% specificity in the detection of metastatic lymph node. And if you are increasing the size cutoff, like a 1.5 centimeter, this will lead to a 56% sensitivity. That is a reduction in sensitivity, but an increase in specificity to 84%. This is studied by Curtin et al. So what we need to understand is, like, even with a small lymph node, there can be metastasis, but as the size of the lymph node increases, the possibility of metastasis and the specificity of that finding increases. And this, now let's go to various ultrasound findings which define normal and abnormal lymph nodes. Like in the picture on the left hand side here, you can see a normal lymph node. you can see that the ultrasound findings of normal lymph node are, it is hypoechoic. It usually has an oval or an elliptical shape, like in the right side, and it has an echogenic hilus, which is continuous with the adjacent soft tissue. Okay, so this is a picture of a normal lymph node. A reactive lymph node is uh, similar to most of the features of a reactive lymph node is similar to that of a normal lymph node. That is also hypoechoic. Reactive lymph node is also hypoechoic, as seen in this picture. It is oval. It has an echogenic hilus, but the hilar vascularity is usually a little more with reactive lymph nodes. And this is a color Doppler image which shows a reactive lymph node. Now coming to the sonography of malignant lymph node. For a malignant lymph node, the findings would be the malignant lymph nodes are hypoechoic, as you can see in this picture. They are round, not the oval or elliptical shape which we were previously seeing. And the echogenic hilus, which is continuous with the surrounding structures, is absent. Like in the first picture, you can see hypoechoic round lymph node with an intranodal coagulation necrosis. You can see that there's this intranodal coagulation necrosis which appears as a demarcated echogenic focus here. And this is not continuous with the surrounding structures. So this is a feature of malignant lymph node. And this picture below, we can see eccentric cortical hypertrophy, which usually indicates focal tumor infiltration. So this is what you can see, the arrowheads which are showing that. And in this picture, apart from the other features like hypoechoic round, absence of echogenic hilus, you can see cystic necrosis. This intranodal cystic necrosis can be seen in squamous cell carcinoma. And in this fourth picture, you can see that the borders are irregular. Apart from the other findings, the borders are irregular, which suggests extracapsular spread. There are certain other malignant conditions where you have to define the lymph node. Like in papillary carcinoma, you can see that the lymph node is hyperechoic, and compared to the surrounding muscle and blood vessel, you can see that the lymph node is hyperechoic, and there are intranodal punctate calcifications, which are specific for which are common in papillary carcinoma thyroid. And this is a picture of a non-Hodgkin's lymphoma lymph node with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You can see that lymph node is hypoechoic, round. It's without an echogenic hilum, and a specific finding would be intranodal reticulations or a micronodular appearance, as seen in this lymph node. What are the other differential diagnoses which are malignant conditions? Tuberculosis is a very common condition which can be confused with a metastatic lymph node. But tuberculosis has certain, apart from the clinical presentation, radiologically you can see that the matting of the lymph node is in tuberculosis. You can see the matted lymph nodes here. And these lymph nodes are matted without any normal intervening soft tissues. And also you can see intranodal cystic necrosis. Another condition can be benign conditions like benign and rare conditions like Rosai-Dorfman disease, which is sinus histiocytosis. Here, the sonographic appearance can be quite similar to the malignant lymph nodes. It is hypoechoic, round, and without echogenic hilus. And you can diagnose this condition only after, many a times you diagnose this condition only after the histopathological examination. And two other conditions with unusual lymphadenopathy are Kikuchi's disease and Kimura's disease. Kikuchi's disease, which is a histiocytic necrotizing lymphadenitis, and Kimura's disease is an eosinophilic hyperplastic lymphogranuloma. So in these conditions, the ultrasonographic findings would be in Kikuchi's disease also, in both the lymph node can be hypoechoic. In Kikuchi's disease, you can see that the lymph node is elliptical and it has an echogenic hilus. The other hypoechoic areas you are finding in the picture are like the internal jugular vein and the carotid. So presence of an echogenic hilum can differentiate these conditions from malignant lymph nodes. Another finding, which is very important in a metastatic lymph node, is the presence of extracapsular spread. There can be irregular margins like this. Fat stranding is another finding due to the edema and engorgement of lymphatic surrounding the lymph node. There can be fat stranding. Also, there will be loss of fat planes with adjacent structures and extracapsular when the lymph node is having extracapsular spread. This is more likely in larger nodes, and majority of squamous cell carcinomas more than 3 centimeters would be having extracapsular spread. But even smaller lymph nodes can have pathological extracapsular spread. So irregular margins and loss of fat planes with adjacent structures can be a feature of extracapsular spread. Another situation which we have to see is a lymph node with extracapsular spread and going for an arterial invasion. So in most of these situations, we would require more than an ultrasound. We would require an MRI of neck, or a CT scan would be required. And for arterial invasion, the most sensitive sign would be loss of fat planes, facial planes. But the most specific sign would be narrowing or irregularity of the artery. So if there is a circumferential arterial encasement of more than 180 to 270 degree, there is an increased likelihood of adventitial invasion. Like in this particular case, you can see that there is narrowing of the carotid artery. So once the morphology and ultrasonographical features are described, it's also important that the distribution of lymph nodes are also mentioned properly, like the site-wise. We should be identifying which level of neck is involved by the metastatic lymph node. And it's also important that the rarer locations like retropharyngeal and parotid area are also searched for properly to identify metastatic lymph nodes. So staging, the features which are important for staging like size, number, side, and extracapsular spread should be mentioned while discussing the metastatic lymph node, or while describing the nodal status. Let's see the other investigations, some of the pros and cons of the other investigations, like a CECT neck. CECT neck, when compared to the ultrasound, which is a subjective investigation, CECT neck is not operator dependent. It's an objective investigation. It's fast and high quality imaging modality. It's easily reproducible, and the size, shape, density, location of mass, everything can be well seen. It's less affected by breathing or swallowing artifacts compared to an MRI. And it can be used for identification of primary, staging of nodes, recurrence and spread, treatment response monitoring, everything. So one specific feature of metastatic lymph node which can be seen in CT or MRI would be a necrotic or cystic area. like in the picture on the left side, image on the left side, you can see that. And this MRI picture also, you can see the metastatic lymph node with necrosis. A specific sequence of MRI which can be used for assessing lymph node, metastatic lymph node, would again be diffusion weighted imaging. So diffusion weighted imaging has been studied by multiple authors, and most of the studies have come saying that diffusion weighted imaging has a higher diagnostic performance compared to the routine sequences. We'll be discussing PET-CT more in detail as we come to the other clinical scenarios like carcinoma of unknown primary or recurrence or recurrent or residual disease scenarios. So one question which is often put forward is like, what is the significance of SUV max in PET-CT, like in PET-CT, in differentiating metastasis by PET-CT. So an SUV of, like most of the studies show that an SUV of more than 3 to 4 can be suggestive of occult lymph node, can be suggestive of lymph node metastasis. But we should keep in mind that even with the raised SUV, we'll be having conditions like inflammatory nodal involvement, anything. So all these findings have to be correlated clinically while we interpret. So now we'll just see what is the evidence for different types of imaging in each of these scenarios, like primary evaluation, carcinoma of unknown primary, post-treatment surveillance, and recurrent or residual disease scenarios. During primary evaluation, the imaging expectations of a surgeon would be like, we need to stage the disease and we need to reach a treatment decision. And we need to see a clear relationship of disease and adjacent structures for surgical planning. Like in case of a node positive neck, we would like to see clearly how close it is to a vessel or whether it is infiltrating the adjacent structures. Also, when the primary treatment plan is radiation, then also you would want to see the neck nodal status. And it's also important to document for comparison on follow-up. So what are the NCCN guidelines for neck node evaluation? NCCN guidelines suggest that CT or MRI of neck is suggested for neck node evaluation, and depending on whichever modality you're using for the primary site evaluation. Like if the patient is having a carcinoma of the tongue and you are using an MRI for the evaluation, use the same thing for the neck nodal evaluation. Similarly, if you're using a CT for an alveolus, a tumor of the alveolus, use the same for the neck nodal evaluation, or CT for larynx, use the same modality for cervical lymph node assessment. And when there are multi-station lymph nodes or lower neck nodal involvement or a tumor with a high-grade histology, consider going for a CT chest or PET-CT. NCCN also suggests that for tumors approaching midline, to determine surgical approach to contralateral neck, PET-CT can be used. Also, NCCN suggests using PET-CT for identifying involved lymph nodes in patients planned for definitive radiation. Let's see the evidence behind each of these investigations. This is an important meta-analysis done by D. Bond et al., which is published in European Journal of Radiology in 2007. So they studied different modalities like ultrasound guided FNAC, CT scan, MRI, and ultra small superparamagnetic ion oxide MRI. And they found out that the sensitivity among these investigations, sensitivity is maximum for ultrasonogram of neck. And specificity is maximum for ultrasound guided FNAC. And that was around almost 100%, 98%. So DBONT has further studied some MRI criteria, morphological MRI criteria for lymph node, metastatic lymph node detection. And his suggestion from this study was that morphological criteria like border irregularity and heterogeneity of signal intensity, in addition to the size, would improve the detection of cervical lymph node metastasis by MRI. People have studied apart from conventional MRI, people have studied magnetic resonance lymphography to study the metastatic lymph node in clinically negative necks. And in this, they have found that magnetic resonance lymphography has high negative predictive value on a node-to-node analysis, but the positive predictive value was only 10%. The negative predictive value is upwards of 90%, but positive predictive value is only 10%. So it's used as a single imaging technique in the preoperative staging of clinically negative, not negative neck, in squamous cell carcinoma of oral cavity was limited. This is another meta-analysis done by Liava et al. For cervical lymph node metastasis in head and neck cancer with clinically N0 neck. They studied ultrasound, CT, MRI, and PET and found that there was no difference in the pooled sensitivity among these investigation imaging modalities. However, CT was superior to ultrasound in specificity. There was no significant difference between CT, MRI, and PET. This was a meta-analysis done by Kaisers et al., where FDG PET was used for cervical lymph node evaluation in head and neck squamous cell carcinoma. And his finding was that FDG PET has good diagnostic performance in overall pre-treatment evaluation of patients. But still, it was not able to detect disease in half patients with metastasis and clinically node negative neck. So detecting metastatic lymph node during pre-treatment evaluation with FDG PET was not very useful. So we know this very much discussed study of N0 trial published from Tata Memorial Hospital. So elective versus therapeutic neck dissection, node negative oral cancer. So from this study, it is clear that elective neck dissection is preferred, and it resulted in high rates of overall and disease-free survival than therapeutic neck dissection. So the practice now is based on this. There is a level 1 evidence to go for elective neck dissection in T1 and T2 tumors, early oral cancers, node negative oral cancers. So the point I wanted to say is like, if we are clinically node negative neck, if we are going for neck dissection, elective neck dissection, actually the role of an imaging modality for neck node evaluation alone, if you are doing an imaging modality only for neck node evaluation, the role has come down after this particular paper. This was again a prospective study of PET and CT MRI in oral cancers with palpably negative neck. And the conclusion was that neck treatment should be mandatory regardless of FDG PET results, as the PET, even when visually correlated with CT or MRI, was unable to reduce the risk of occult neck metastasis to below 20% in T4 tumor patients. So This is again a prospective study, 167 patients with oral cavity squamous cell carcinoma, comparing the use of PET, ultrasound, CT, and MRI. And the conclusion was that due to the high number of small lymph node metastases from oral cavity carcinoma, the non-invasive methods of neck staging are limited to maximum accuracy of 76%. And so elective neck treatment should be mandatory for all patients with oral cavity squamous cell carcinoma. This was an old study which compared palpation versus ultrasound examination, which said that there was a clear-cut advantage of ultrasound over palpation, and the false negative rate was 25 for palpation and 3 for ultrasound examination among a total of 95 patients, 95 necks. Like palpation correct, there were 95 neck evaluations done, and palpation correctly identified one or more metastases in 70 out of 95 patients, whereas ultrasound detected one or more metastases in 92 out of 95 necks. So we know that ultrasound has an advantage, definitely has an advantage over clinical examination. So taking all this evidence into consideration, a question which I have in mind, or probably an assumption which we can reach, is in oral cancer with node negative neck, if you are anyway proceeding with neck dissection and adjuvant therapy, neck dissection, and adjuvant therapy is based on histopathology report only. Okay, so does imaging really play a significant role? I think the participants can think about it. So there is another scenario like a node positive neck. In a node positive neck, we usually do a CT or MRI with contrast for primary and neck for clearly seeing, for documenting the lymph node, as well as seeing its relation with the surrounding blood vessels and surrounding structures. This is important for the staging and planning of definitive treatment. I wanted to bring your attention to this particular study by Yausam et al., published in Radiology in 1995, which said that a 270-degree or less obliteration of fat plane may not be suggestive of vascular invasion, and more than 270-degree obliteration of fat plane surrounding a blood vessel by a metastatic node or a primary disease can be suggestive of carotid artery invasion. So whenever you're assessing the vascular encasement by a tumor, if the tumor is surrounded by if the blood vessel, like the carotid, is surrounded more than 270 degree, the possibility of artery invasion is very high. There is a sonographic classification of vascular resectability, which would be useful when you are assessing large lymph nodes around carotid artery. This was proposed by Mann et al. In Laryngoscope, published in Laryngoscope 1994. It divides the vascular involvement into 4 stages. Stage 1 would be there would be independent carotid pulsations, and there would be an obvious plane of cleavage between the tumor and the vessel. And in stage 2, residual independent mobility of carotid artery is still present while you're trying to move the lymph node, but an obvious cleavage plane is no longer visible. And stage 3, there is loss of independent mobility of carotid artery with luminal compression. Now the vascular boundaries are no longer visible and circular encroachment of vessel is presumed. And in stage 4, there is a gross invasion of carotid artery with and without intraluminal tumor, and also with impaired blood flow velocity in color Doppler ultrasound. So these can be considered like when you are planning a trial neck dissection, or when you really want to do a dissection around for a large lymph node, or doing a color Doppler can help. But using the same criteria may not be true when you consider different biologies, tumor biologies, like a squamous cell carcinoma of head and neck like a papillary carcinoma doesn't behave like a squamous cell carcinoma, you know that. So tumor biology also should be considered while you actually term a particular tumor as resectable or unresectable. Like in this image, you can see that this is both a papillary carcinoma thyroid, which is going around the carotid. It's almost like 360-degree encasement, more than 270-degree encasement here also. But if it's a papillary carcinoma thyroid, you know that the patient still has a possibility of good survival if he can remove this tumor. So this picture shows that's the same patient. Perioperatively, we had taken this patient for a trial neck dissection, and this is the left common carotid artery, and you can see that the tumor is going around it. With careful dissection, the whole tumor could be removed circumferentially around the carotid. So this was not difficult, and this may not be possible at all when if it is a squamous cell carcinoma. Just because it's a papillary carcinoma thyroid, you had this opportunity of removing it. So what I wanted to say is like an imaging should be interpreted in the context of the tumor biology also. Now let's come to this carcinoma of unknown primary and imaging. We all know that PET-CT is a very useful investigation in carcinoma of unknown primary. Its significance was established by this review by Rustavan et al., which is published in Cancer in 2004, which mentioned that FDG PET detected primary, which is undetected by all other modalities in approximately 25% of cases. Also, it detected previously unrecognized regional or distant metastasis in 27% of cases. However, it has a low specificity for tonsillar tumors and a low sensitivity for base string malignancies. There was this study by Jogan Johansson et al. As part of the HANCA 13. PET-CT was studied in carcinoma of unknown primary. And this study came up with this conclusion that overall detection rate of PET in carcinoma of unknown primary is 29%, and therapeutic change of treatment was seen in 25% as a consequence of FDG PET. He studied around 67 patients. Another thing we suggested is he had done PET before pan endoscopy, demonstrated fewer false positive pathological focus was his conclusion. So PET definitely has a role in carcinoma of unknown primary because it can increase the detection rate of carcinoma of unknown primary. The primary diagnosis PET can make a difference in detecting the primary in these situations. Though you will always find some studies which are contradicting it. But if you weigh the evidence, PET is a useful investigation in carcinoma of unknown primary. Now let's get to another scenario where a post-treatment surveillance, like patient has completed a treatment, like surgery or surgery followed by radiation or a primary chemo radiation. What NCCN suggests is like post-treatment baseline imaging of primary and neck, if treated, should be done within 6 months of treatment. And in post-chemo radiation or post-radiation neck evaluation, if there is persistent disease or progression suspected, and if you want to evaluate, CT or MR maybe with MR with contrast may be done, and at 4 to 8 weeks of PET-CT, 4 to 8 weeks, and even PET-CT can be considered. But if response is present, it's better to do PET-CT after at least 12 weeks or CT or MRI with contrast at 8 to 12 weeks. This is because if you want to get, the negative predictive value by PET-CT is maximum after 12 weeks. So it's important that you choose your investigation at the appropriate time also, even in the post-treatment surveillance. So let us just discuss some of the clinical practice during post-treatment surveillance. If it's a stage 1 and 2 tumor, The usual practice is like imaging is done, at least what we practice is like imaging is done only if symptomatic, and provided follow-up can be ensured. Like patients who regularly come for follow-up and who we can trust for follow-up will come every month for follow-up in the first year. So imaging is usually done for primary or neck evaluation only if the patient is symptomatic, and symptoms are like pain or swelling or any signs like tenderness or swelling are taken into consideration while deciding on imaging. And it's important to note that if the patient is complaining of any symptom, take it, uh, give it the due importance. If you need to image, you have to image. You have to image. When it comes to post-treatment surveillance of stage 3 and 4, most of these patients undergo double modality, combined modality treatment. And the usual practice is like CT or MR with contrast, or a PET CT is done after 3 months during the 3 to 6 months period. And this decision can be influenced by the financial position of a clinically improving patient. Because in our country where finances are also very important, so we will have to choose the investigation wisely depending on the clinical picture of the patient. Like if the patient is doing well clinically without any signs of any recurrent or residual disease, and if the patient prefers, probably we'll have to take a decision while weighing several factors. This is another scenario, the fourth scenario, where we have to consider an imaging in recurrent or persistent disease. The aim in such a situation would be to rule out systemic metastasis and also to assess the resectability of a tumor. PET CT scan is a very useful investigation in recurrent residual disease when you have to assess the disease. PET CT can be used for ruling out systemic metastasis. Also, it can show an area to target biopsy, and thus it helps decision making. The important thing which we have to see is like PET CT should be preferably done before doing any biopsy or any invasive procedure, so that you can get the maximum out of the PET CT evaluation. The timing of PET CT, like I was discussing before, timing of PET CT has been studied, and it is found that when PET CT is done before, like after 1 month, like in this study, PET was compared like before 1 month and after 1 month of treatment. What is the performance of PET CT? And this found that there is significantly higher sensitivity of 95% after 1 month of treatment, and a significantly higher negative predictive value of 99% after 1 month compared to that before 1 month. And for distant metastasis, negative predictive value of PET was quite high at 98%. This is again a study for assessment of PET CT in the management of neck in post-definitive radiation treatment. And the negative predictive value of PET scan done after 12 weeks was 100%. And the positive predictive value was, the positive predictive value is 43%. So we are probably in this scenario, we have to always we have to take the clinical picture into the context and see and interpret the PET finding. So negative predictive value after 12 weeks is what probably we should be aiming at, or negative predictive value after 12 weeks would give us a lot of reassurance that the patient is not having a disease. And if the PET scan is showing some uptake after 12 weeks, and if you're not clinically suspecting anything, still you can plan another investigation like an FNA or something to confirm that there is disease or there is no disease. So even this study mentioned PET CT after 12 weeks as the right time to do this imaging. You should also be knowing about this PET neck trial. This was published in New England Journal of Medicine. This study was about PET-CT surveillance versus neck dissection in advanced head and neck cancer by Hisham Mehana et al. And this study came up with the conclusion that survival was similar among patients who underwent PET-CT guided surveillance and those who underwent planned neck dissection after definitive radiotherapy or chemoradiotherapy. And the surveillance resulted in considerably fewer surgeries and it was more cost effective. So after following RT or chemoradiation, doing a PET-CT can actually reduce the number of neck dissections you're doing. Only concerns about PET-CT in the post-treatment scenarios like it does not really offer much help in estimating the extent of disease. So for that, you may need something like an MRI or some other investigation, like a Doppler for the vascular assessment. So in summary, in patients with clinically N0 neck, ultrasound scan is a useful but operator-dependent imaging tool. In a patient with node positive neck, CT scan or MRI can be used for neck imaging, and the choice is dependent on the modality used for evaluation of the site of primary. CT scan of the chest or PET-CT can be used for metastatic workup whenever there are multiple level lymph nodes or large lymph nodes or lymph nodes in the lower levels of the neck. PET-CT is likely to improve the detection rate of carcinoma in unknown primary when other modalities fail. Like PET-CT can improve the detection rate of primary in CUP when other modalities fail. PET-CT scan has high negative predictive value in post-radiation surveillance cases. It is best done 12 weeks after treatment. So thanks to our team at Lakeshore Hospital. I'll just put forward certain questions to the participants. Like this is a case where it's a 42-year-old female with a 1-month history of non-healing ulcer, which is 1 into 1 centimeter on the left lateral border of tongue. Rest of the oral cavity, oropharynx, larynx, pharynx, everything is normal. Clinically, there is no significant lymph node enlargement. Biopsy is suggestive of motilely differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. What imaging would you choose? Yeah, I get a lot of responses like ultrasound, neck, MRI, CT, everything. But I think most people prefer ultrasound of neck alone for this patient, which is probably what I would also prefer for this patient. And just an ultrasound of neck, especially since we are going to address the neck surgically. Then ultrasound of neck is what I would also prefer. But there is nothing wrong in going for a CT or a MRI neck, which is recommended by guidelines. This is a case 2. It's a 56-year-old male with the right level 2 region, approximately 3 into 3 centimeter size, firm mobile lymph node with restricted mobility. Oral cavity was normal, and an endoscopy of the nasopharynx and larynx, including the nasopharynx, oropharynx, laryngopharynx, everything was normal. FNAC was suggestive of metastasis from squamous cell carcinoma. So, what investigation would you choose for this patient? Yeah, most of the people have suggested PET-CT as a suitable investigation for this particular case, which I also agree with. But if PET-CT is not available, what imaging investigation would you suggest for metastatic workup of patient or any patient with an unknown primary? What imaging investigation would you choose? Yeah, people mention it as CT scan of the chest, USG abdomen. Yes. Okay. Yes, CT scan of chest and USG abdomen can be used for metastatic workup patient when PET-CT is not available. All right. Thank you very much for the patient listening. Okay.